Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to the Catholic Mama, where you'll learn how to deepen and defend your faith, find comfort as we share the vocation of parenthood, and learn how to raise your children confidently Catholic. I'm your host, Christine Mooney Flynn. Let's get started. Welcome. Hello and welcome back to the Catholic Mama. This is your host, Christine Mooney Flynn. I hope you are having a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, middle of the night, whenever you are listening to this podcast. For us here, it is rain, which actually isn't that bad because it has been in the 90s with the heat index over 100. And once it's September 1st, I just feel like it's fall already. You know, maybe a little bit of a summery feel for Labor Day, but let's just get to fall. So this last week has been excruciating for me. I know there are people who love the heat. God bless you. I do not. My mom said that even when I was 2 years old and we were living in Southern California, no humidity, beautiful weather. If it was above 80, I was dying, and it's still true. And I grew up in North Carolina, and I just never got used to the heat and humidity. And for some reason, when I moved up to the Philadelphia area, I thought I'd be moving far enough north that the summers wouldn't be as long, or I don't really know what I was thinking, but I got to tell you, it's the same. It feels the exact same, except our winters are colder. The summers are just as bad as in the South where I grew up, but the winters are colder. So I don't know if there's really a win-win there. I mean, I like the cold. I guess that's fine. All right. So a couple weeks ago, we went to my brother's house, and he lives just outside DC. We went down to my brother's house. He and his wife are expecting their first child, which is very exciting. And they decided to do one of those gender reveal parties, which I've never actually been to one of those. We never did a gender reveal either. I think with our firstborn, actually, I should just say we have 3 kids. None of them were planned. They're all surprises. So, in varying degrees, they were all surprises. So I think we were just excited and didn't really know what we were doing with our first. And then after that, we weren't going to start doing gender reveals. And I love theme parties. For some reason, the gender reveal just never made it onto my list of themed parties to have. So we go down to my brother's. We do the gender reveal. It's a boy. Very exciting. And it's funny because I decided to be on Team Girl, but as I was looking at the ultrasound pictures again, I was like, yeah, that's a boy. But I stuck with my Team Girl. I was wrong. Happily, it doesn't matter. Happily, unhappily, I was wrong. It's just hopefully a very healthy, wonderful baby boy. And she has an easy pregnancy the rest of the way, wonderful labor and delivery and all that. But I was thinking, my sister-in-law was asking me some questions about parenting, and then after we left on the drive home, I was like, I wonder if I were to give a collection of resources or books to are struggling through a particular phase in their older child's life, what resources would I give? So I started thinking about it, and I don't know if my sister-in-law will be listening to this episode or not. If you are, I am planning on getting you these resources. I'm going to gift you these books that I'm going to talk about today. And also just some resources. I am kind of chuckling to myself because my brother is the oldest of the two of us, and they have quite the jet-setting lifestyle. And I kind of chuckle. I've had 3 now. I know what it's like. And man, his life's about to change, isn't it? I remember watching one of the How I Met Your Mother episodes, and Marshall tells Lily, why don't we have a kid? It's not really going to change our lifestyle that much. And then they flash forward to after the child's born, and clearly that's not the case. I think when I was pregnant with my first, a friend of ours said, at the beginning, babies are a lot like puppies. They need a lot of care. You have to feed them all the time. They have to go to the bathroom all the time. Yet you can't leave them for that long. Well, with a baby, you really can't leave them at all unless they're with somebody else. And then once the dog gets out of the puppy stage, then it's very different. The dog can be left alone for hours if need be, and they probably won't poop and pee in the house. Who knows? Although I've had some as a dog gets older, you're faced with all these things again. So I think that oversimplifies the changes that a baby makes, and babies are wonderful, and they always are a blessing, which I do want to talk about babies and the pro-life stance, and that will happen. Babies and the pro-life stance, and that will happen in another episode. It is extremely important, and I also feel like the pro-life stance isn't anybody who's a pro-life advocate. They may be missing some really key points that they can argue, and what they can stand on, and how they can argue more effectively against a pro-choice advocate. So that'll happen in a future episode. I'm currently reading a book called if I can talk. I haven't slept much. We have a teething baby. Persuasive Pro-Life by Trent Horn. It's been a really incredible book. But that is not the type of book that we will be discussing today. So I'm going to start at the beginning. We'll say at birth, because there are pregnancy books. All these parenting books you could read before your baby is born. Excuse me. I haven't slept much. We have a teething baby who's about to start walking. So that's a lot going on in a little brain and a little body. So it is a lot of poorly slept nights, or no sleep nights, or very early mornings, or very late nights. All the above. You start prepping for these things. I think it's important. You can do a bunch of research beforehand, and you say, oh, this is how I'm going to do things. And then you get into the midst of it, and you're like, whoa. How many of us parents earlier in life said, well, when I have kids, I'm not going to let them do this. But I remember telling my aunt once, she's like, well, gosh, you get in the shower, the baby's finally resting, and you decide to take a hot shower. You get in the shower, and as soon as you get in the shower, the baby starts crying, and you have to hop out. And this was many years ago, and I said, well, I'll just let the baby cry a little bit, won't I? Very funny. Oh God, I get the mom sweats when a baby cries. There's no way I would take the fastest shower and probably come out with soap still in my hair. So you say these things when you are not yet a parent, and you're not in the trenches, and your hormones haven't shifted in a way that makes you want to protect this child above all else, and you're just looking at it from an outsider point. So I don't want to say that you need to over research any of it. I actually did very little research until something came up. If something came up, then I would do research. I had a friend of mine who just researched every possible thing that could go wrong in a pregnancy. Can I tell you how relaxed she was? You can't do that to yourself. And the same thing, you could read a bunch of information. All it's going to do is, spike the anxiety in your mind without actually giving you hands-on practical advice that you can use, because it's just going to be too much stuff. So some of these books, it's a good thing you could read early and get your mindset in the right place. But go back and revisit when you need to. One of the things that I have always done is I always research. That's my background anyway. I was an anthropologist, so research was and is still a passion point of mine. So researching is something I love to do. But also, at the end of every day, I still do it pretty much every day, unless I'm, passed out asleep on the couch by 8:00 at night. Is I kind of review tape, just like you would sit down with your basketball team in high school and look at the tape of the game the next day and have your coach just say, oh, okay, this was no good. You really got to tighten this up, or, hey, good job on this point. And then you move forward from there. Well, that tape that you're watching is just a mental replay of your day. And we all go through these points with our kids, and even other relationships with the spouses or at work, where you can replay what happened. It's not just replaying it to beat yourself up, though. You need to replay it as a point like, oh, okay, well, I yelled at my kid here because I don't even know. Whatever you kids do. I yelled at my kid for this thing that they did. You know what would have been better? If I sat them down and I told them why I didn't want them to do what they did, and this was the punishment for this, because they did this, this is if this, then that. And it being very dispassionate but fair. In the moment, it's very difficult if you are wound up to be dispassionate and fair. But you can't expect yourself to be dispassionate and fair if you don't give yourself and your brain a chance to look back at where you made a mistake and then rectify it in some way, even if it's just mentally at first, like, okay, you know what, I could have done better. I guarantee the next day or the couple days later or whatever, when something similar happens again, remember that review that you did, that self-audit. And you'll be like, oh, wait a second, stop. Even if I did just yell one syllable, stop yelling for a second now. Let's go back. And then you can say dispassionately, hi, I don't want you eating snacks up on the windowsill in the living room because you always dribble applesauce there and ants get it and we already have an ant problem. I would like you to put your applesauce in the trash, get a paper towel, wipe it up, please. Thank you. So if you don't review, you'll never know. So between research and reviewing all the time, this is just what I do. The real point here is to not beat yourself up. If you yell at your kid, if you could have done something better, great, learn from it. Don't beat yourself up. And the way to actually really help, if you are Catholic, I can help you. I'll give you some advice on how to let go of any guilt that you might be harboring. When you look back at the day and you realize just how many mistakes you made, let me tell you something, little secret. It's called the Sacrament of Reconciliation. Go to confession. I'm actually going this afternoon. Go to confession. And actually, I have another podcast episode about the importance of the Sacrament of Reconciliation. It is a sacrament that Jesus gave to us. So take full use of it. You gotta see, you feel wonderful walking out. So review the tape, the mental tape of what happened, and then go to confession and really get absolution for it. So that is not a book that I would give to my sister-in-law, but that is a really good resource, I think. It's really helped me over the years. So let's go back. A book that two books that I would recommend, actually I'll just get the books if you're a new parent. Get these books ahead of time or get them now and just use them over the years. Some of them will fall to the wayside. You won't need them forever. Other ones you'll pick up later on and you'll need as your kids get older. So the first one I really liked was The Baby Book by Dr. Sears. What I appreciated this more than the what to expect when you're expecting or what to expect the first year or what to expect to toddler years or whatever. The what to expect books, they're thin in comparison to the baby book, which is saying a lot because those books are pretty big. And I didn't feel like they handled a lot of the things that I was going through or what I was interested in. They didn't go into enough depth on. The baby book, conversely, had a lot of depth. And I also was a follower and fan of Dr. Sears before that, especially when it comes to baby sleep. And he's a proponent of co-sleeping, which I am as well, and given that it's the right circumstances. So I always like the baby book, and I buy that for expecting parents or new parents for those reasons. I also, as far as if you are expecting, you know somebody who's expecting, or a new parent, I was gifted a book called The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding. And that was at the baby shower of my first child. And a friend of mine who had had a kid less than a year earlier had been given that book from a friend of hers. And so they just kind of pass along. And now I wind up giving that book to anybody that I know who's having a baby. They get The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding. And now if they say straight off the bat, hey, I'm not going to, I'm just formula feeding, thanks, but no thanks, then, clearly that wouldn't be a great resource. But The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding was a great resource for me, and it's continued to be a great resource, that the feedback I've gotten from friends that I've gifted this book to. The one caveat that I will give for that book, and I got the same caveat from a friend of mine, is it's a little bit militant when it comes to natural birth. If you really listen to the guilt that they can try to place on you if you have to get an epidural or what it's a C-section versus a vaginal birth, that gets a bit much. But if you can look past that, so I always write a little note when I give this book. It's like, don't pay attention to when they get really militant about it. if you have, like, a friend of mine who was the one that gave me this book, she had to supplement with formula for the first couple of weeks because her milk didn't come in fast enough. That book may make you feel a little guilty about that, but the resource itself about how to breastfeed and what you should be going for, cues, what types of positions you could breastfeed in, it's great. So that's a great book, Womanly Art of Breastfeeding. Should you just keep that in mind, that they do kind of make you feel, or can make you feel a little guilty if you let them. But the authors are doing it. I think they do have the best intentions, especially when it comes to, there's a rise today in elective C-sections. Women just want to be able to schedule, hey, I want to have this baby out by September 22nd. Let's do the C-section on the 21st. And doctors have are continuing to agree to these elective C-sections, even though they are unnecessary. So I would imagine that maybe it's just kind of in response to a growing concern about this elective C-section. I mean, if you need to get a C-section, that's totally different, but that's not quite the case that's happening right now. And, I'm just trying to think. There's one other one. A friend of mine recommended a book, and now I'm blanking on the name. It was about a mindset. It was about a mindset. I guess she was told during birth she was so calm that they told her she was like a goddess, which, no thanks as far as that terminology goes. I don't really like that, but she prepared her mindset so well for birth that she could stay very calm. I think if you have the right midwife or nurse or doctor, they can help you do the same thing. I don't know, as like a first-time parent going in, I don't know what you could do to really prepare your mindset. Now that I've had more than one, every time I go into the birthing process, it's easier. I know what to expect, even if I do still get a little bit scared because I know that there's intense pain coming, but I've done natural birth now for the last 2, and it's not that bad. I always tell people it's not that bad. It's transition. It's a purposeful pain. In other words, it's not like you're just breaking your arm and you have to heal from that. Along after birth comes some great hormones. Oxytocin, that love hormone, just really fills you up and makes you feel even more like all this was worthwhile, and you forget the pain. Mother Nature is smart about all that. So, baby book, breastfeeding, we got that under our belt. When I was going to have my second child, I was a little nervous about how to get baby number 1 to accept baby number 2, and I reached out to a friend of mine who has 2 kids, and they're pretty close in age, just like my first 2. Actually, I guess all 3 of them are pretty close in age. And she recommended the website of a woman whose name is Janet Lansbury, Lansbury. And she follows a type of parenting style called RIE, which is, it stands for Resources for Infant Educarers. I'm not sure if educarer is an actual word, but it's very respectful parenting. I am more, I don't like to dance around the subject too much. I like to just be bold, say what needs to be said, and then we move on from it. So my parenting style, when I was reading Janet Lansbury, I kind of knew that I wanted to do that, but I wasn't really sure how to go about doing it. So when I started reading her books and her blog, it all started to just fell into place. And it gave me this solid framework on which to, if I was struggling with the kids, when it came to discipline or how to integrate the two or whatever was going on, I could go back, research or read what I needed to do from her books and just get that refresher I needed in order to move forward in a way that felt comfortable for me. To move forward in a way that felt comfortable for me. An example would be, we had a pediatrician that referred to immunizations as bee stings, and he has very infantile kind of voice when he was talking about, oh, here comes the bee sting, I was saying, like, this is a child, this is a human. What are you talking to this kid like this? And instead I switched to a pediatrician who was very no nonsense. And she's like, what's going to happen next is X, Y, and Z. It won't feel that great, but it'll be over very quickly. Here we go. And I appreciate that. I don't want to be talked down to, and I don't want my kids to be talked down to. So, if I take my kids in for a shot using this RIE method, I would say, hey, just so you know, tomorrow we are going to the doctor. You need to get a shot because it's time for your immunization, or you were exposed to chickenpox and you haven't gotten that vaccine yet. That will keep you healthy. We need to go get this done. Here's what you can expect. And then I would slowly talk through the entire doctor's appointment with them. And this has been a game changer. There's no fighting over things. I mean, sometimes there's a temper tantrum here and there, but to be able to dispassionately explain what is happening ahead of time, if you can, why it's happening and what can be expected, huge difference in the behavior that I see in my children since I started, because I didn't always do this. I didn't have the resources to do it. So I highly recommend it. Even when I give punishment, discipline is really better, because I'm disciplining my children, not punishing them, disciplining them. Their discipline fits the transgression, and it makes sense to it. Hey, if you are going to hit your sister, you have to be by yourself until, because be gentle and not hurt anybody. I'm going to need you to stay here, and I'll let you know when it's time to, you can come out or whatever. So Janet Lansbury, again, Lansbury, same as how you spell Angela Lansbury, like Murder, She Wrote. The two books, No Bad Kids, is about discipline, and then also Elevating Childcare is also a really good one. So those I will be purchasing as well for my sister-in-law. If you're listening, they're coming for you. Along that vein is a pediatrician or a doctor named Dr. Lehman, Kevin Lehman. He wrote a book called Making Children Mind Without Losing Yours, which sounds great. That book will go even into if you are a parent who's just kind of trying to pick up a different style of parenting when your kids are, tweens or teens. So his examples in his book even go into the teen years. So that might be a good one. I started reading that, and it's very similar to the RIE stuff that I follow, which RIE was created not by Janet Lansbury, but by a woman named Magda Gerber some years ago. And it still works. It's great. So Making Children Mind Without Losing Yours is another good one. Dr. Kevin Lehman, Leman. I'll put all the show notes. I'll put all the links for these in the show notes. I found that one. I'm finding that one to be very helpful. It just reinforces the parenting or the discipline style that I already do. But it also gives some great other examples and ways that I may not have thought about things before. I will say again, I read parenting books a lot. Sometimes I just go back to the stuff I love. Sometimes I'm just looking at a blog post from Janet or elsewhere, and it really is just to reinforce what I'm doing and to make sure I still remember and feel do that in the best way possible. So even if you're not having an issue with the discipline for your child, there could be a nugget in there in one of these books that will just make sure that you continue not to have an issue. And then also, this is specific for a style of homeschooling or I guess home education called, it's Charlotte Mason. Charlotte Mason was a woman who lived back in the 1800s, very pragmatic, really supported the kids being outside and playing, but also reading books that elevated them and pushed them to be better thinkers, maybe in a way that more so than what we do now. So that's a totally different, that's a homeschooling framework. We don't need to get into that, but there is a book called For the Children's Sake, Foundations of Education for Home and School that Susan Schaefer Macaulay wrote a while back. And that was one of the first books. I read this book when I was still an atheist. And it she just very freely talks about God's relation to the home, basically just talking about the domestic church. And at the time, I'd never heard anything like this before. And one of the lines in there that has continued to be one that I think about all the time is where Susan says that parents are the servants and shepherds of the family, just like Christ is a servant and shepherd to his people. So it really goes, the book talks about the importance of kind of a quieter, more simple way of living, not jammed packed with video games and electronics and smartphones, and making sure that you let your kids go outside and read real books to them, not just, every once in a while people will give my kids a condensed Paw Patrol episode, but it's, just a book version of it. And it's hard to read it. It's just crap. And they're fine. The kids like the pictures, but we're not just here to entertain our kids. We need to educate them. And you do that in these simple and more quiet moments. That's where you can kind of let the love and the knowledge grow into those moments. So I really liked For the Children's Sake as well. It really gave a very great Christian understanding of what it means to be a parent, and how children are humans just as much as we are, and we're all in this journey towards Christ together. So it was even if you're not going to homeschool your kids, I thought it was just a very gentle, loving, and informative way of looking at parenthood. It's one that I open up and just kind of read a few paragraphs from every once in a while, because it was very meaningful to me. And it was one of those things that one of the first books that I even thought about Christianity in a way that wasn't derogatory. So that I just have an emotional connection to that book, but it's a very good book as well. So lots of good resources. I think they've ones that have really helped me over the years and continue to help me. I've just started homeschooling the two older kids, a preschool and kindergarten. And I use a lot of the principles that I've read in these books over the years into the homeschooling that we've created. And as I mentioned, Charlotte Mason, we are following a modified Charlotte Mason curriculum this year for the kids as well, testing that out. So if you have anybody who is going to have a baby soon, or maybe it's in the midst of those young children's years, or if you maybe yourself just need kind of a boost in why you're doing what you're doing, or maybe need a new approach to discipline or how to engage with your kids, I recommend these resources. They've been very helpful. I'll put the links down in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for listening. If you can, it would mean the world to me. If you haven't done so already, leave a subscribe either on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you are listening. Leave a review. The more reviews, the more eyeballs get on this podcast, which means we can spread this little ministry, a Christian perspective out in the world.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.